NCRP Productions presents the Fireside Chat Series. NCRP Productions presents another Fireside Chat. I think that's what we're calling it.
Yeah, I think that's a
All right,
solid,
so another
yeah.
Fireside Chat. This is Barry.
And this is Pedro.
And tonight we're going to talk about one of the upcoming campaigns that I've been really excited that we were going to do, basically restart. It's Unhallowed Metropolis, and I'm going to pass it off to Pedro.
Excellent, yeah, and you're not the only one excited, because this was a great game we got to play for years, and I'm really excited to get back. But I got some questions for you. I think people want to hear about it. So let's start off. I want to talk about, let's talk about what we're looking at running. So give us a little lead into Unhallowed Metropolis.
All right. So Unhallowed Metropolis has come through 2 editions, at least that I know of so far. There's a first edition and there's a second edition. Credited with the writing are Nicole Vega and what's his name? Jason Souls. And I apologize for not doing you guys quick enough, but I had to open the book to be sure. And the products in the current line are Unhallowed Metropolis, which gives you the Metropolis itself, and Unhallowed Necropolis, which effectively, the way I look at it, adds in the spirits and the psionics. I have heard, we had heard rumors that there was a 3rd edition coming, and writers, if this is true, please let us know, because we will advertise the heck out of it and get you guys press here, because we're dying for a 3rd edition. There's more stuff to do.
Please, yes.
Yes,
very much.
yes.
Okay, so what I want to go to next is I want you to tell us how did we come to playing Unhallowed Metropolis specifically?
Well, so the group had been gaming for easily a couple years at that point, and one of our good friends, Dino Fernandez, he had suggested to us, hey, I've played this game at a con, I've run this adventure at a con a couple of times for this game, Unhallowed Metropolis. And he laid it out to us as Victorian horror, which it is, and kind of told us a little bit about the characters. He told us a touch about the world, but not a lot of it. Said it's basically a zombie game in the future, but the future has Victorian feeling, Victorian sensibilities, and that to me was kind of exciting. Sadly, we lost Dino. He passed away on October 20th of 2018, and that took its toll on us as a group. It's great guy, really, really wonderful person. We miss him, but we still have the campaign because of him, and we've gotten to move forward with it.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to continue this story? Because when Dino ran, Dino was an amazing dungeon master, game master, what have you.
Oh my God,
anything he ran, any character he played, I always looked forward to seeing what he came up with. So, wonderful guy. Tell us, what inspired you to keep it going?
Well, he and I had been talking when he was running it. He was really only running it to get us the flavor of the game. He had run this adventure a couple of times and said, I just kind of want to get you guys into it and see if you like it at all. And the more he ran, and the more he and I talked, and the more the character that I ran in there started to progress, I said, this is a world I really am curious about. I ran a character for that game called Aaron Peter Grayling III. Dino had said to us, somebody needs to run a noble, and let me give you an idea of how he portrays this to us. So he brings it to us, and he said, so this is 2105. We're in the future of Victorian England, but it's still basically Victorian England, and we have these things called mourners. These are basically ninja women. And one of our players said, oh, I'm running that. And he said, and there are characters, you can have police inspectors, and one of our guys said, I'm going to do that. And you can have these doctors. You can do all these different types of characters. The problem is, for my game, there has to be a noble. There has to be an aristocrat. And nobody was jumping forward, if I remember correctly. No one jumped forward for it. And I said, you know what? I want to try this game out, so I'm going to bite the bullet, and I'm going to take the noble, the aristocrat. And then he really built the game around me. So not that he gave anything away, and not that, sadly, I'm ever going to learn anything more than I know, but as we played, and I started to hear what was going on and the story he was unfolding, I said, oh my God, I have to be a part of this. And so I talked to him about taking over, and he liked the idea. And I said, well, could I take over the exact world we're playing? Everybody plays the same characters. I will roll my character out to an NPC, and you can bring in a new character. And what was kind of cool is he had introduced a character into the game that my aristocrat had gotten very connected to, and he ended up taking over that character. And you're going to learn a little bit more about what's going on. We're going to do a number of intros to the game. We're going to start with Aaron's diaries or Aaron's journals. We're not certain on the name yet. And those are going to give you insight to when I was playing the game. So when I was playing in Dino's game, I was playing Aaron. When I switch out, he becomes an NPC. He's still a focal point for the group, but he becomes an NPC that everyone plays against. So another thing that kind of came up as we were talking about it is I was asking Dino, what kind of things are you looking at for the way you're doing the game? He and I talked a little about ideas of what to read, what to look at, what to watch. And I went and I looked through a couple of things. Years before I had run, Savage Worlds had produced a product called the Rippers. And it was a kind of a twist on the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which is another one of the amazing inspirations. That's a comic series, a couple different formats that Alan Moore did. And they're amazing comics. If you get a chance, read them. They're out by Vertigo. But the Rippers campaign was set in Victorian England. So I already kind of had a feel for it. Even though it's 200 years in the future, I kind of had a feel for it. And then we had a group that got together to play the Witch Hunter game that came out from PCI, or Paradigm Concepts, Inc. And in this one, this goes actually back even farther. You're running a witch hunter in the Quakers' time. The United States is just getting going. We're 1600s. It's Solomon Kane's, Edgar Rice Burroughs' Solomon Kane character. And it had the same kind of idea, these kind of underpinnings of something going on. And the other thing that they all had in common is they are all like 7th Sea as well, from John Wick and from AEG. They all have an alternate Earth, some slight twist, but still the basic Earth we're playing in. And then the additional inspirations that I had was, of course, the Penny Dreadful series from Showtime that's now on Netflix. And then recently I found Ripper Street and Frankenstein Chronicles and Peaky Blinders also on Netflix. So those inspirations kind of rolled together for me, and I said, all right, I'm ready. I've got it figured out. I want to run this game. And Dino agreed, and I took over. And
it worked out great.
I sure think so.
We all had fun. Dino had a great time, I remember. And I mean, you did the story justice. I mean, it all fit really well with what he was laying out.
Thank you so much for saying that. I had always hoped it did.
It really did. I mean, I couldn't speak more highly of it.
Good.
So what I love about it is when you pick this up. So like if I came into your shop, if I came into North Coast Role Playing and I picked this up, I mean, the cover itself is so drawing. I mean, you got this big green Unhallowed Metropolis right there. You got somebody in a top hat with this crazy gas mask apparatus. And I mean, I remember the first time I saw this and I'm like, what is happening? So let's just pretend I didn't know what Unhallowed Metropolis is. I come into your shop, I pick that up, and I say, hey Barry, what's the deal with this? What could you tell me about, the world and what I could expect if I was playing this or running it? What could I expect? What kind of stories or themes maybe?
Well, it kind of depends on how you're coming in, because as an experienced gamer versus an unexperienced, you're going to have two different feels from this. If you've never played a role-playing game before, this is going to be a tough one to get into. Simple system for somebody who's been playing for a while, but somebody who's learning it new, it's a little bit harder to get into. The world itself, they describe it as gas mask chic. So the basic idea is the world is just getting worse and worse and worse. Overpinning the entire world is this thing called the blight, and they don't have a direct description chemically of what it is, but what it's doing is it's twisting the plants and it's twisting the countryside, and there's darkness everywhere. The sun barely pokes through again, Victorian England, if you know a little bit of your history, at that point we had the beginning of the technological advances, the Industrial Revolution going on. And one of the things that allowed the Industrial Revolution to move forward was fossil fuels. And in the case of England, that was coal. They were burning coal for everything. And coal creates a lot of soot. And that soot in the air mixed with the fog used to make London the foggiest port in the world. Comically enough, we live in the foggiest port in the world now. We live in Eureka, California, and that port there is no longer, England isn't anywhere near as foggy as it used to be. But they used to make jokes about being able to cut it with a knife and eat it for dinner. And so the blight has infected that fog, that miasma that's there, and everything's dark, everything's dingy. There's that feeling of dread. If you've ever seen, and this is me trying to talk to you as somebody who's going to buy the game, if you've ever seen American Werewolf in London, and it's an older movie, but it's still worth seeing, there just was that feeling at all times that there was something going to hit you, something was wrong, something was uncomfortable, and that's the way you're supposed to portray it, I feel like. You have the Metropolis, which is what they call London at this point. The zombie plague hits. It hits everywhere at the same time, and it takes over the world. And London, if you know your history, London is set up as a series of basically forts, one inside the other, inside the other, inside the other. And so they were able to back up against this zombie horde and finally block it at the center of London. And then over time, as they were able to gain ground and get better weapons and get a little better idea of what was going on, they started to push the zombies back out. And they got them out far enough and built walls high enough that you now have the Metropolis we play in. Roughly 1 million people, potentially the largest city on the planet at this point. And that's what you're going to be playing in. And you can do, as a game master, any adventure you want in there. But generally, you're going to be dealing with the horrible things that people do. And in our game, we have a warning. I want you to take it seriously when you listen to our warning at the beginning of each of the games. But this is a horror game, and you can take it as far as you want. But this is a horror game. This is terrible people doing terrible things, and the backdrop for it is zombies. And then to make the world move, you have a number of different new technologies, invented technologies. Tesla becomes a major part of things. Edison and Westinghouse don't cut him out, and instead his amazing discovery of the Tesla Tower becomes the thing that kind of rejuvenates the world. The Tesla Towers basically put out electricity around an area. I don't remember if it gets defined in the game, but the idea is you have, like we have the internet running through wireless and phones running through wireless right now. The idea was electricity running through wireless. So electricity in the air that all you have to do is basically stick an antenna or a Jacob's ladder up into it, and you've got power coming down to you. And they actually have some of the technology or things like there are electric guns that shoot electricity, and they pull that electricity out of the air. The other thing that you've got going on is you've got London, but there are some other places still alive. New York is alive. Prussia, around Berlin. Remember that there's no Germany yet. We're still in the late 1800s, early 1900s. In fact, the zombie plague hits in 1905. So if you are setting for research, if you're a history buff, you are going to have a blast with this. I sure did. But the other cities out there also will include, they do a little write-up about the Crimea, the Papal States. France is definitely an interesting mystery. There's not a whole lot going into it, and that's one of the reasons I want a third edition or another adventure or something. Then there's the characters themselves. There are a bunch of options. I mean, we had mentioned the doctor, but doctor is not that simple. I mean, back then, your doctors did a whole bunch of things. We talk about a doctorate when we go to university now. that doctorate is kind of the same idea. You were not just a doctor of medicine. You could be a doctor of theology. You could be a doctor of all these different things. And so actually in our game, as we progress, there are 2 doctors. One of our doctors is basically your standard family practitioner with a dark side. And then the other one is actually more of an alchemist chemist. So there's definitely differences there. Again, there's more to the mourner than ninja, female ninja, but that is a reasonable starting point to it. They have monster hunters, which are the executioners. Wait a minute. So it's Undertaker, and the Undertakers are basically your standard trophy hunter or monster hunter, those type of things. One of our favorite, and he's no longer playing with us, but we had a Dhampir in the group, which is a half vampire, half human. He doesn't have all the benefits, but he also doesn't have all the negatives of the vampire. And there are a few other character classes that are out there that I'll let you figure out on your own as you get to see it. But really, really nice mix, and I didn't feel like there was a lot missing. And then the biggest part of the game is corruption. And corruption is every character starts with at least 1 level in corruption. So you already have a dark world, a dying world. The blight is wiping everything out. Crops are coming up black and inedible. And as you're going down this terrible path for the world, each of the people are going down these terrible paths. I look at it as the blight is infecting you, the player. And so the corruptions can be things like my character is driven and he has to make rolls to stop what he's doing to do things. And the corruptions have levels, level 1. So at level 1, if I'm doing something, it's a fairly easy roll, a success roll for me to move on to the next topic. If as I get higher up, it gets harder and harder. It gets to the point where my character, which is where he actually is now as an NPC, he doesn't eat. He doesn't remember to sleep. He doesn't remember to drink. People have to come and remind him. This corruption has taken over him, and he is driven to learn secrets. And I'm not going to give those secrets away because you're going to learn them in the game. How about you? I mean, as a good example, I can have you hear what Pedro's corruption is.
Yeah, so my corruption, I loved it. I played Desmond Wright, the Doctor.
Dr. Wright.
Dr. Wright. Loved this character. So his whole thing, without getting too in-depth of it, is he lost his wife and when they were younger, and now has spent the rest of his years in an attempt to remake her. Now, her spirit haunts him, and he sees her, periodically, and his whole thing is, and in this world, this is something, there is the creation of homunculi and anathema. So the idea is, and he's tried this dozens of times, and it hasn't worked every time.
It hasn't worked anytime yet.
Anytime. Well, he's created things, in the backstory, but they always end up messed up. And his main goal is to try to recreate his wife perfectly and find a way to merge the soul into the body. He will do anything. I mean, it goes from the very beginning when I'm, just like, oh, I hear something new, some new study, I'll go and read that. Oh, sorry, my boy, I gotta go read this. All the way up to, where we kind of end, I believe it was like a 3 corruption.
I think you're at 3, yes.
Where, we really have to catch this train, but if I see something over there, a psychic that I just heard talking about something, I'm over there, you have to pull me away. I find books, any research that even sounds close, I have a hard time getting away from it, and it's great. That's one thing that I personally really loved about this setting is, sometimes you get players that, they don't, maybe they don't want to, or they don't think about, a driving force. This game gives you a great mechanic to create a flawed character that is that's in a, a downward spiral, and it's really up to you at how quickly that goes. And there's some mechanics with it that I really like that we'll maybe touch on in a little bit, but yeah, I mean, it's great. It works.
They're strong. It's a strong push on your character. Games will have hindrances and flaws, but not hindrances and flaws. They will have hindrances and benefits. In this game, there really aren't any benefits. It's just corruption. You go down the scale. There are 5 levels. If you ever hit level 5, your character is lost and you become an NPC and start a new character. There are ways to redeem yourself, but they're extremely hard, and you can never bring your corruption back from your starting point. So in the case of my character Aaron, he started with a level 1 corruption as the beginning character. No matter what I do as far as penance or redemption, I can never bring it below a level 1. And there are abilities that come with these corruptions. If I ever use the ability after having regained my redemption, it falls right back down to the level it was at and adds one more. So you do have to also watch as you slowly get your character potentially knocked out of the game. It's Cthulhu's going insane, that type of thing.
It's a fun ride, though, all the way down.
It definitely is.
Now, kind of we touched on it a little bit, but let's give a little bit of example of some of the maybe game mechanics. So, thanks for telling me about the world. Now, what little mechanics might you be able to tell me the basics of it?
Okay, so the mechanics themselves, you're looking at a pretty simple system. It is 2d10. 2 10-sided dice are rolled. There's no exploding numbers. You add those 2 dice together, and then you will add something appropriate to it. So you will either have a skill, or in some few cases, you will use one of your attributes. So you're going to roll 2 dice. Let's say you get a 3 and a 4, and then you might have a skill level of 4, so that total is 11. Simple things in the games, simple things are an 11. They go up from there, 11, 14, 16, 20. As a game master, I can run it higher than that. If it's completely impossible, I'm going to tell you it's impossible. But the game allows you to run it to a point where it would be impossible no matter what anyway. They just don't tell you not to do that. But straightforward mechanic, and everything works on this mechanic. So if I'm going to make a skill roll to drive my car quickly around a corner, or get my carriage and the horses to jump a small river, each of these things, same thing, 2d10 plus the appropriate skill. In the case of combat, I'm going to be rolling 2d10, adding the combat ability to it, whatever the combat skill is, whether I'm using a sword, a knife, my fist, a blunderbuss, and then I'm going to add those together. The nice thing with combat is you hit a number, that number then gets added to another number. So for example, if you're shooting a weapon, it's going to be my number plus the weapon's bonus. It's going to be compared to the vitality, which is effectively the unarmored ability of the character to survive wounds. And then you're going to have a number. That final number has a gradated scale, and that scale gives you a flesh wound all the way up to death. So very straightforward and simple, but you as the game master have to set those levels. They call them DR, or difficulty rating, and you have to set that DR for each of these things. That's why I said at the beginning that it's not a beginner's game per se. It's not something I would stick on somebody who's just starting, but it is very simple and very straightforward.
Yeah, so I mean, I remember playing it and I really love it. I agree, somebody who's brand new, I mean, I remember there's a couple things you have to be walked through. So if you're game mastering it, make sure you read a lot.
I can tell you that too. As with just about every game that's out there, and this is not a disrespect on gamers, it's a little more disrespect on the editors, it is hard to find some of the things. They're not exactly where they need to be. But again, it is absolutely worth it. This is an amazing system. They have created an amazing world. I can't wait to start this again.
Me too. Now, one final question that I had for you.
Okay.
Now, I remember clearly when Dino started it. I remember starting in this game, and immediately I was pulled in. The world he created, so detailed. I mean, he gave us the little primer, but once you were in it, I remember being in it. You know, sometimes we have a tendency to look at our phone when we're gaming, and shame on all of us. But when I was there and Dino was running, I was in. I don't remember barely touching my phone. And the nice thing is that when we switched over to you, same thing. So detailed. You really painted a world and you kept it so thematic. So now, if you could tell me, if you could boil it down into words, how did you keep the story so detailed and so together in the world? How did you really keep that so detailed?
Well, I will tell you, I can lie to you and say it's brilliance, my boy, but really it was kind of a flying by the seat of my pants. I have gamed for so long at this point, I start to trust the players. So I have a basic framework of an idea. And with this one, in the game that we were playing with Dino, my noble, my aristocrat character had done so many things. There were a ton of plot hooks left out there. We did things like he had set up a deal where he was going to take control of his family's mine. That was something that hasn't come up again yet, but could. We had a deal where he had signed on with his name as an aristocrat to start a new Zeppelin travel service, initially between Prussia and England and London and the Metropolis, whichever one you want to call it. But he was tied to that, and that's something I did connect you guys up to. It was easy, and the background that they had, there's a lot of holes left in it, and I don't mean holes like they wrote it poorly. I mean the writers left a lot of areas where you could fill in the pieces. And I love history. It's amazing how the more I have gamed, the more I have enjoyed reading real history, because let me tell you, you're not going to create anything in real life that is crazier than history. There's so many different things. And so I would come up with an idea, I would give you guys kind of a feel for it, and you guys would react to it. The current situation, for example, we were starting to find bits and pieces in a couple different places, and I hadn't connected them in my head yet. One of the connections that was there was Egyptian hieroglyphs. And so what I had the characters do is I had you guys, as you well remember, figure out what they were, the glyphs, not what they meant, but what they were, and you brought them back to Aaron, the aristocrat, and he, off-screen, had figured out somebody who knew how to read them, gave him an indication of what they were saying. This gave me the ability to send you guys on the next wild goose chase that you found the goose, and you guys are following it now. That's actually the story you're going into as we begin this, I don't know what you call it, second season, third season if we count Dino's as the first, but the next part to the game. And for listeners, I'm going to let you know, we haven't played in a year and a half, so it's going to be a little bit of work to get us back into it. But I have been spending hours trying to figure out where do I want to take the story next. So in answer to your question, which I feel like I dodged it a little, most of the ideas come out of all the different things that I've looked at, that I've watched, that I've read, that I've listened to. I have been listening to other people's play, some of the podcasts that are out there for Unhallowed Metropolis. I have talked to people through the internet, through Facebook, asked what they've done, and I've pulled, as any good game master should do, I have pulled from their stuff to tie it together.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'm really excited to get those journals out because we really did a lot. And, you know, it took going over this and restarting this to realize just how much stuff we actually did.
Oh my God.
And I think for anybody who's interested in this game, hearing those, you're going to get to really see the wide range of what you can do with this system and the storyline and everything. And I totally agree with you, the history thing. I did not pay, if I had even had the inkling that I was going to be gaming and how useful it is, not just for the like inherent critical thinking and everything.
Right.
I would have paid a lot more attention in history and cared a lot more because it really is insane and I could have used it by now. But so this game really is great for people who love history as well.
Without a doubt.
Now, one final question. If you can think of one game mastering advice piece that maybe somebody going into this, is there one that you can think of?
One piece of advice I would give an unhallowed game master, I think it's, don't be afraid to go over the top. Again, remember I warned you about the warning for the game, and again, I urge you to take it seriously. But don't be afraid to go over the top with the corruptions, with the blight on the world, with the, they call them animates in the game, so the animate plague, the animate invasion. This game has so much true horror. We're not talking blood and guts. This is not Freddy Krueger. This is the true horror. You're uncomfortable. Go over the top. Take it as far as your players will let you. I know at one point in our game, and you know the incident, there was an incident in our game that was extremely over the top, and other players in the game let me have it and let the player have it who was a part of it, and haven't necessarily let up on continuously letting them have it. And it was a very over-the-top idea. I I brought it to you guys not really certain how you would react, but I expected some kind of an extreme reaction that hopefully was going to lead you into the next piece of the game. And going back to the last question, which is how I made all the connections and how I wrote the story, it's things like this. The group's reaction to that incident allowed me to bring that incident back into the game, and you guys are now dealing with the outcome with it. And your character, I'll let you guys know, it is Dr. Wright. Your character is now dealing with the fallout right there in front of your face, and the other people kind of watching you, trying to figure out how you're going to react with it and how the other person involved is going to react with you. So over the top is where you want to go with this game.
I was not expecting it, and it's great. And yeah, if I could throw something in there just along with that,
yeah,
highly, and I recommend it for every game now, session zeros, but I 100% guarantee with the horror content and what you can do in this game, talking to your players, kind of finding out what is, you probably have a good idea of what's okay and not, but, just kind of having a good sit down and talking like this is a game of, like you said, true horror.
This is true horror.
Things are going to happen. If you feel that it is way too uncomfortable, speak up. Don't ever feel like you can't speak up, but you can tell great stories, and even in the horror, you can do what we did. Take it in, realize we all knew this was horrific things, and none of us in the real world would ever do anything close to that.
No, most of you guys wouldn't hurt a fly.
But,
I know that.
And then you look at this character, and I remember us, it was horrible, and we knew it. Doing that, we laughed at it in the sense of, wow, this is horrible.
Right.
And it's good. It's good for you, I think, to really see this, because then you get that reassurance of, wow, this is bad. I could never see myself doing this. Things like this could happen in the real world. So that's why we can take solace in the goodness of it.
Right. And again, it is fantasy role-playing. You are taking on parts. You're living out fantasies, good or bad. I'm not saying these are good fantasies, but living out fantasies that are not part of the world you were being in. You are taking over the persona of somebody who is not you and giving life, good or bad, to somebody that wouldn't be there without it. So it's storytelling. Have fun with it.
Yeah, always. Top of the list, have fun. Well, Barry, thank you so much. This has been great. I get to see you running it for us, but it's good to kind of peek behind the screen.
Absolutely.
So yeah, thank you for sitting down with me.
Pedro, thanks for being with me again tonight.
And, well, everyone, hope you enjoy it.
All right. Have a nice evening. Thank you for listening to another NCRP Productions podcast. We value your support and would love to have you like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, all at NCRP Productions. You can also find our podcasts on Anchor, Spotify, or wherever great podcasts are found. We value your thoughts, so please don't hesitate to leave feedback and comments. And if you want to reach any of us directly, we are available at ncrpproductions@gmail.com.